it's like my home in terms, you say the word theatre, the Royal Court's my home. I guess it's where I found out who the hell I was in terms of theatre, because thinking back, I had kind of run screaming from the Royal Shakespeare Company, where I went back happily. I'd run screaming from the kind of shouting in the dark thing, and I was doing a play by Dusty Hughes called Commitments at the Bush, which Richard Wilson directed. And in a way, he taught me to act again, and I listen and respond. And Max Stafford Clark saw that, and I was brought here to do Tom Kilroy's version of The Seagull in the 80s, which was a huge success, and because it rerouted the play to Ireland. And then I stayed on to do a Snu Wilson play called The Grass Widow. And then I was Richard's assistant director on a wonderful Robert Holman play called Other Worlds. Then I did The Lucky Chance for the Jules Wright and the Women's Playhouse Trust. And in the way that one's life is a series of join up the dots, so I kind of learnt to act again. And then The Lucky Chance led very directly to me going back to the RSC to do Les Liaisons Dangereuses. And so that led to going to Broadway, and then a whole other chapter of one's life started. And then I came circuitously back to the Royal Court, because always stayed, felt at home, and always stayed in touch with whoever was running it, saw everything that was on here, and then became very involved with Elise Dodgson and the international department. I directed the first reading of Vasily Sigurev's place, Plasticine, upstairs. And then was this huge moment, I suppose, when you realise that it could only be the Royal Court where I could read a couple of emails in a copy of The Guardian and bring them to Ian Rickson, who was by that time the artistic director, and say, have you read these? Which were emails from Rachel Corrie to her parents. And only at the Royal Court would somebody like Ian pull Elise into a room with me and then set this project up, because it took a year for it to even get off the ground. And then, Kath Viner was brought on, and she and I adapted it together, and it opened upstairs. It then transferred downstairs. It then went to the Edinburgh Festival, the West End, and New York, with controversy of one kind or another trailing around with it. So, on every level, I kind of measure out my life in Royal Court steps. In a way, the Royal Court is an example where everything's should be aiming to be a game changer, because the word theatre is being questioned all the time. What is it? And because you remove, in one sense, the ego of the actor or the director, because it's about the writers, you feel that the playing field is an appropriate one. Everything that is done here should be connected to life, real world, and what your job as an actor or a director is. But I suppose I'd have to say that, in a way, the game changer was the very first thing I ever saw here, because that felt like life-changing to me and game-changing, because I was a teenager at school and came here in the 60s, and if you can imagine what theatre was to somebody then, I'd seen Shakespeare at Stratford, but in terms of anything modern, there was the West End and French windows, and I came here in the 60s and saw Happy End. That was the first thing I ever saw here, which was, Brecht and Kurt Weill, and it's like the walls open up because you see what theatre can do. It's the only place where the writer is at the front of everything. So if you like, you're a worker, and it's very clear what your function is. And so, what I love about the building is that you're always in touch with people in offices and people in workrooms, and I think all the work that Stephen Daldry did in redesigning the building and opening it up and and keeping the ghosts clinging to the walls. I think that was all crucial, that you recognise that great theatre spaces have ghosts on the walls. Or either that or they're accidental. You know, the other place at Stratford, the original one, or the Almeida, you know you're in a great space, but you don't know how. Here, it was always beautifully made. And having said that it's a theatre about writers, it's also an absolutely magical space for actors to really understand their relationship to the text and the audience at the same time. One of the validations of the Royal Court being about writers is an unforgettable moment to me. When I was doing My Name is Rachel Corrie, because you don't ever have actors' names or directors' names outside the theatre, was bringing Cindy and Craig Corrie, her parents, into Sloane Square off the plane from America, and for them to just see the words "My name is Rachel Corrie" in red lights in Sloane Square. Once My Name is Rachel Corrie had moved to the main house, and even with demonstrations going on outside and it being kind of open house discussions and things, nevertheless the theatre was absolutely packed and for the whole run of it. And an unforgettable memory for me was going up in to take notes during one of the performances, up into the circle, and I opened the doors, stepped inside, looked around, and I would say I was measurably the only person up there who was over 17.
What's your wish for the Royal Court for the next 60 years?
Somebody keeps funding it, and that it's, well, in a way that it's funded and free, in two different uses of the word. You know, as the BBC has its wings clipped and the arts endlessly gets clipped, you just hope that the Royal Court will still be in the vanguard of free speech.